Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Baruchim Habayim, welcome. This morning I am going to quote extensively an article from last week's Wall Street Journal. I am doing so because of my particular fascination with it, and if you didn't see the article, I'm sure that you'll also be very interested in hearing about it. The headline is, "For Sale, the World's Most Expensive Hebrew Bible. Ask for Sharon." The earliest, most complete codex might fetch $50 million at auction. It wouldn't be worth that much without one person. So a billionaire called Sharon Lieberman Mintz one day last summer and told her something that would turn her life upside down. He was ready to sell his copy of the Hebrew Bible. She understood better than anybody that this wasn't just any copy of the Hebrew Bible. It was the earliest, most complete Hebrew Bible known to exist. This roughly 1,100-year-old treasure belonged to Jacques Safra, a financier who kept the antiquity in his collection for decades, and he wanted to put it in the hands of the preeminent Judaica specialist at Sotheby's. The fingerprints of Miss Mintz can be found all over the auction that took place this past week that could make this sacred text worth more than any book or manuscript ever sold. Sotheby's is hoping the most precious Hebrew Bible in private hands will fetch between $30 and $50 million. By the way, when I read the article, I suggested to Ed that we might consider purchasing it for B'nai Torah. And he said to me, well, let's split it. At the high end, that would exceed the $43.2 million price tag on a rare copy of the United States Constitution that was auctioned off in 2021. That's $43.2 million. But it wouldn't be worth that much without Miss Mintz, who has been consumed for so much of the past year by sheets of bound parchment. She has played the most crucial role in selling what might have been the world's most expensive historical document. What made it valuable is what makes it so hard to value. There are thousands of Picassos and Van Gogh paintings, and there are even 13 remaining copies of the Constitution, but there's nothing else quite like this Hebrew Bible. It needed someone with scholarly training, a keen sense of market dynamics, and personal charisma to put a price on it. Someone like Miss Mintz. Not many people work with priceless artifacts, but every business has to quantify the intangible. The volume that Sotheby's has branded as the Codex Sassoon is one book consisting of the 24 books of the Hebrew Bible, clocking in at 792 pages from several hundred sheepskins and weighing 26 pounds. Imagine bringing that one to class, right? It's a carefully preserved artifact that dates back to approximately the year 900. And being in the presence of anything so old is a mystical experience. You feel like you're able to touch a millennium of history, Mintz said. The Codex Sassoon is missing about 15 of the 929 chapters in the Bible. The Aleppo Codex is less complete, and the Leningrad Codex is not quite as old, which is why Miss Mintz says the lot being auctioned is truly one of a kind, and she would know. She says working with this biblical material is the pinnacle of her career, which began when she studied art history in college and graduate school, where she specialized in Hebrew illuminated manuscripts. In 1987, she was hired as the curator of Jewish art for the Jewish Theological Seminary's library, a position that made her especially qualified to help Sotheby's when it needed someone with her specific expertise to help with its Judaica and Hebraica operations in 1995. She's been an integral part of Sotheby's biggest Judaica sales ever since. Now a senior consultant for books, manuscripts, and textiles, she's involved in every aspect of the auction process. It's pretty much soup to nuts, Ms. Mintz said. She sources materials and maintains relationships with the collectors who might want to buy or sell them, which means she has to be comfortable dealing with both papers and with people. One of the clients who trusts Ms. Mintz with his Judaica and Hebraica is Mr. Safra, who invited her to Geneva in 2015 to appraise his manuscripts and review his collection. This is the most thrilling part of her job. You never know, she said, what you're going to find. Nothing compares with the excitement of walking into a private collection and encountering things that you've never seen before. It was on that trip when she laid eyes on the Codex Sassoon, and she said she felt a tingle go down her spine. The saga of the prized book in Mr. Safra's possession is biblical in its own right. It was traced back more than 1,000 years to the land of Israel, or perhaps Syria, through scholarship, carbon dating, and inscriptions. It has been sold and resold several times since the first deed of the sale. It also mysteriously disappeared for 500 years. But the prominent Judaica collector David Solomon Sassoon wrote a 350-pound check for the surviving, nearly complete codex when it resurfaced in 1929. That was an investment, boy. It was auctioned by Sotheby's in 1978 for $320,000. Again in 1989 for $3.2 million, and changed hands for the last time when it was purchased immediately afterward by Mr. Safra for $4.2 million. He told Ms. Mintz that he was considering a sale of his manuscripts when she visited him 8 years ago, and she connected him with a photographer and the researchers who could help make that happen. They kept in touch. She worked with Mr. Safra to sell a 14th century Hebrew Bible to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in 27. And then he called her again last year. It was time to start the process of selling the cherished Codex Sassoon. He knew just the person to sell it. Sharon, he said, was undoubtedly one of the most passionate, knowledgeable people about Jewish texts I had ever met. To work with her again, not only to bring Codex Sassoon to auction, but to be able to tell the remarkable history and story of the Bible was a clear and obvious choice. Ms. Mintz soon began working with colleagues throughout Sotheby's to find comparisons for this incomparable object. The first one that came to mind was the copy of the United States Constitution that happened to be the most expensive document ever sold at auction. The hedge fund titan Ken Griffin won the foundational text by outbidding a group of cryptocurrency investors. The improbable competition pushed the value of 6 pages higher than anyone ever envisioned, including the experts at Sotheby's, who put the high estimate at $20 million before the frothy auction closed. This, remember, was the United States Constitution. The auction closed at $43.2 million. The price range for the Codex Sassoon suggested that it could make one historical keepsake look like a few scraps of paper. For as long as it has existed, only the wealthiest members of society could afford this Hebrew Bible, and not much has changed in a millennium. The short list of people who have splurged on a single manuscript include Bill Gates, who spent $30.8 million in 1994 on Leonardo da Vinci's Notebook, and the Carlyle Group, David Rubenstein, he was a co-founder who purchased a copy of the Magna Carta for $21.3 million in 2007. At that time, it was touted by Sotheby's as the most important document in the world. Those sales helped set the market for the most important document in Miss Mintz's world. She enlisted scholarly authorities on biblical texts and handwriting to research the book's authorship. That is not the authorship, but who wrote this particular volume. There were histories to be written, photos to be shot, videos to be produced, and catalogs to be printed. Then a book that has seldom been exhibited and not in the past 4 decades hit the road. It hit the road with heavy security. It made stops, tour stops in London, Tel Aviv, Dallas, Los Angeles, and came back to New York before last week's auction. There are 2 reasons those people are willing to pay huge sums of money for this Hebrew Bible. The first is that they're spellbound by the Codex Sassoon. And by the way, you should look it up, Google it, because the photographs are magnificent. The second is this person named Sharon Mintz. They have an interest, said Richard Austin, Sotheby's global head of books and manuscripts. Then they come and they see it in person, and then they listen to this incredible teacher, Sharon. And the interest goes up exponentially. There's some questions about the Codex Sassoon that not even Miss Mintz can answer, such as who wrote it and how it was miraculously discovered after being missing for 500 centuries. But she knows everything that is known about it, right down to the source of the dark splotches on some pages. Tannin, he said, it's wine. One of the many other questions I had for Miss Mintz wasn't exactly about the book in front of us. I wanted to know how she thinks about success in her job. I think we've been successful in allowing people to engage with this work and making the public aware of this extraordinary manuscript, she said. People know much more about this than they would have known if it were a private sale. It's not only the metrics of success in her business. While it seems almost sacrilegious to judge a Bible by its price, she can't help but root for the Codex Sassoon to break the Constitution's record. Sotheby's has secured an irrevocable bid for the undisclosed price, which means the lot is guaranteed to sell, and the pre-vetted potential buyers, including major collectors and notable institutions, are known. As soon as the hammer falls, it will belong to someone else. But she might be the only person in the auction room who doesn't need to pay to see the coolest and holiest stuff that anyone can ever imagine. She has the keys to the library and to the vaults, stuffed with documents, manuscripts, and once in a while, a very old book that she says gives her chills. I feel the access is sufficient, Miss Mintz said. It's almost like I own it. Well, it was bid upon this past week. The highest bidder for the Bible was a man named Alfred Moses, who is currently the United States ambassador to Romania, and he will be donating the Bible to the Anu Museum in Tel Aviv. It's a relatively new museum of Jewish history. It's an amazing, amazing story. And the coincidence of this story taking place and landing on Parshat Bamidbar and the week before Shavuot is what didn't escape me. The Codex was lost. It was in a wilderness for 500 years, and then it reappeared. The emphasis on receiving Torah is at the core of our religious life on these days. The words are as old as we are as a people, and we place the most profound and deepest meaning on them. We learn in the text that they come from God, and we treat them with that kind of reverence. And we allow those words to come into us, and we allow those words to go through us. And we hope those words go to future generations. So as Cantor Paul was saying before, many of us experienced this very profound moment scribing here as we completed this COVID Torah, the Eitz Chaim Torah. And people found incredible connections to letters and words, as Paul did to the Lamed. I'll tell you a story. It happened in my earliest years as a rabbi. I believe I mentioned it once before when I was working in a small city in Ohio. And part of my responsibility in this little town was to be an ambassador for the Jewish community to the non-Jewish community, which was about 98% of the town, maybe 99%. And so I'd frequently speak to church Bible study groups, and they would come to the synagogue, and I would do a 1-hour Judaism 101 class. And at the end, I would take the people into the sanctuary, and I would show them the Aron Kodesh and the Sifrei Torah. And I would take a Sefer Torah out of the ark, and I would speak to them about the writing of the text, the parchment, the quill, and the ink. And engraved in my memory from those days, some 40 years ago, was a lovely Methodist woman who stood on the side of the podium and she cried. She spoke about the fact that she read the Bible every night before she went to bed. But now looking at this Torah written by hand on parchment with a quill, it made her understand how it is so deeply valued by the Jewish people. We, or at least most of us, if not all of us, do have Bibles in our homes. But seeing one that's over 1,000 years old with wine stains speaks, I think, to the enduring desire of a people to preserve what we were given. That there's something awe-inspiring seeing the same words that we have in our Bibles recorded so long ago as a reminder of the constant quest by a people to improve the world through these holy words. And it's true not just with the Bible, it's also true with the Magna Carta that spoke to the rights of every human being, and it's true with the Constitution of this country, and it was true with the 187 words of the Gettysburg Address, and it's true with the Sassoon Codex. To record it and preserve it for unknown future generations to see, that is so beautiful, and that's what captured me. Finally, I will tell you the following. On Wednesday morning, there were well over 100 little children who are part of our early childhood program. And they're getting together frequently these weeks because the year is coming to an end. And they were sitting here in the sanctuary. They're part of our Talbot early childhood program. And as one of their year-end programs, they come into the sanctuary and they receive little stuffed Torahs from our educational director, Kathy, and from myself as the rabbi. And each class comes forward and each kid is given his or her individual Torah. And the cantor led everybody in singing, and we blessed these children, and we watched them take their little Torahs and hug them. And my thought was that any one of those Torahs can capture the hearts and love of a little child, and perhaps it will stay with them for the rest of their lives, and they will give such a Torah to their children, and you know what? It will be worth more than $38.1 million. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.